Hi guys, this is Max here, back again with hopefully another great political video, and today we're going to look at everybody's favorite topic, the United States Senate election, the highest body in the US federal government that is up for election this fall. And today we're going to take a look at the 14 races which Max deems to be competitive to highly competitive. And some are just somewhat competitive. Now, we're going to go through them category by category. I already filled out the races that I can deem to be entirely safe for either party, and obviously, I also have a third category added for Evan McMullin. I won't use this today because I don't think he's going to win the Senate race in Utah, but at least his race is under consideration, so I thought it'd be appropriate to put him up there as a contender. Now, we're going to go there from west to east. Now, first of all, Washington, that race is shown to be within 10 or 11%. I believe when it's all said and done, it will be more like 6, 7, or 8%, but it'll still be a likely margin. In 2010, when there was the big Tea Party wave, this was actually decided by just 2 percentage points. So it would have been possible that in 2016 Washington would have a Republican incumbent. Yeah, but it didn't end up happening, and it's probably not going to end up happening ever again. We're just too polarized of a nation by now. But nevertheless, we're going to move on. Now, Nevada, I believe to be lean Republican. I do believe that Adam Laxalt is going to win against Catherine Cortez Masto. She doesn't really have any strong appeal. Well, I mean, she's not very energizing. She doesn't have a very passionate support base. And the Nevada Democrat Party is also not really what it used to be. Like, literally, the state Democratic Party run progressive primary challengers against the instituted establishment Democrats in these congressional districts that used to win their elections by huge margins. And ever since the Nevada Democrat Party elected a hard left member as their chair, they've just not been doing too well. So I think it'd be safe to say that probably this time around, Adam Laxalt, who has a household name, I think his dad was a governor or a senator or something of that kind in the state already, he's gonna not cruise to election victory, but I think he'll have a somewhat easy path forward to winning. Now, let's go to Utah. I believe there was some polling that showed it to be close. However, I don't think that Evan McMullin will win by, or I mean, will lose by anything less than 5% in the end. And because the polling so close has been far, I've put Utah as a lean state, but I'd actually go as far as saying it's going to be likely Republican. Because Utah is still a very conservative state, and even though McMullin is a conservative candidate, I don't think he's going to make it to be a very close race, and I don't think he's going to win unless the incumbent Senator Mike Lee does a major screw up. Now, I think if there was a color in between lean and likely, if there was maybe the color in between the slight and a little darker red, I'd put it as this. But for now, I believe McMullin will lose by about 5.5% in the end, so it's going to be likely. Now, however, in the state of Arizona, this is a difficult one because I was tempted to believe that in Arizona, Mark Kelly would eventually drop in the polls against Mark Brnovich, who's currently ahead for the Republican primary, and that the Republicans will pick up the seat by a very narrow margin, which could still happen. However, I've looked through poll after poll after poll after poll, and none of them had any specific Republican challenge up. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not possible for the Republicans to win. Polls have been proven wrong so many times in the past, and I don't just want to go by polls the way unbiased election predictions does. We do have to take other factors into consideration. And therefore, I would love to say Arizona is eventually going to be won by a Republican. However, for that to happen, the Republicans first have to pick their nominee and they have to start campaigning so we can see how the race evolves. But as of right now, if the election was held today, I do think that Mark Kelly would hold on to his seat by a hair. And I'm not saying that because I previously endorsed Mark Kelly. I thought he was a moderate. Actually, his record so far has been pretty in line with the average Joe Biden Democrat. So I will retract that endorsement. but I do objectively think that as of right now, he's slightly favored. Now, in the state of Colorado, there are two candidates left for the Republican nomination. One guy who's very conservative, who's a state senator. The other guy who's just a businessman. I think his name is something with O'Neill, probably Irish or something. Let's see. It's probably gonna be for the Republicans. Joe O'Dea, yeah, Joe O'Dea is gonna be the Republican nominee, and he's been polling quite far behind his opponent, and it's Colorado. And even though it's gonna be mostly a red wave year, Colorado is a state that has shifted greatly to the left. So it surprised me if the Republicans were able to pull off an upset victory in the state, but it's still possible. It happened in Virginia. It might happen there as well. Now, in the state of Wisconsin, I think that Ron Johnson might actually win by a likely margin, to be honest. He won by around 3.5% the last time around. 2022 will be a red wave year where the national environment's going to be a lot more Republican than it was in 2016, where he already won by a solid margin. And he's up against the lieutenant governor, who, even though he has some name recognition, does not have the ability to gather voters behind him the way Ron Johnson does. And also, as a far-right, but yet still somewhat business-oriented Republican, he can do well in both the Driftless area, which is the working-class part of Wisconsin that heavily backed Donald Trump, as well as the Waukesha area, where there are a lot of moderate suburban people who just like having low taxes and stuff like that. They're also going to back Ron Johnson. I think he's going to be fairly safe on his way towards re-election. Now, Illinois, still, I really don't like Tammy Duckworth. I've really been at tough odds with her ever since she was advocating for, like, racial segregation and stuff. When she was, like, there was this incident where she wanted more Asian Americans to be in the Biden cabinet, and as a protest to that, she would not vote for any more Biden nominees until he'd appoint an Asian American. That's pretty racist, and that's kind of a deal breaker for me. However, it'd be hard to say that she's even remotely at risk of losing re-election, though, because it's going to be a red wave year, and since probably the governor's election in Illinois will be a little closer, I do think that she's going to win by slightly less than 15 percentage points, so I'll put this race as likely. Now, Ohio, J.D. Vance is probably going to win by around 10. Tim Ryan has great working class appeal, but so does J.D. Vance. And J.D. Vance is running a campaign that is focusing on the rural base in Ohio, which is absolutely necessary for any Republican who tries to win in the state. We've now really reached a point where the only way for a Democrat to win a statewide election in Ohio is if they already have a very long, very strong history of being with the working class in that state, which Tim Ryan does, and he's probably the only Democrat who has even a slim shot at winning this race, because most other Democrats wouldn't be able to do so. But J.D. Vance also has that working class appeal, and I believe that he will win not by 10%, but maybe by 6 or 7 or 8 over the Tim Ryan, who has some, though not as much working class appeal as J.D. Vance. Now, moving on to North Carolina, I do think that, come on, Ted Budd will win this race. The Democratic Supreme Court Justice from the state Supreme Court in North Carolina, she's not really well known, and also, like, I have a hard time believing that she's running a very solid campaign. It's probably going to be Ted Budd. He has more name recognition. He has more of a history in that state. I do think he's going to win quite handily by a couple of percentage points. And Marco Rubio in Florida, he's kind of a moderate guy. He's not as conservative as a lot of other senators, even though he was trying to, like, ride that Tea Party wave back in 2010. Nevertheless, Florida is heading far into the Republican direction, so he would not face too many obstacles trying to win, especially since his opponent is kind of just a very generic Democrat, and she doesn't have a lot of energy behind herself. Now, let's move on. There are 3 states left. 3 East Coast states, 3 fairly conservative, and 3 very, very vital for both the Republican and Democratic Party to win. Now, first of all, The state of Georgia, I believe, in the end will be decided by about 2 percentage points. I do think that Herschel Walker is going to win. And I've said it all the way back when he first announced his campaign until this very day. The college football vote in the South, especially, plays a great deal. And Herschel Walker, being the former receiver for the University of Georgia, is going to be a big factor and it'll help him to election victory. And actually, Raphael Warnock has some has some skeletons in his closet. I'm sorry. He had some rape allegations and stuff. It wasn't really used by the Loeffler campaign. She could have easily portrayed him as a domestic abuser and stuff like that, but she rather called him radical liberal Raphael Warnock, which really wasn't all that smart of a move. Well, nevertheless, I do think that this race will be won by Herschel Walker. And in Pennsylvania, now we're getting to the tough deal. I have looked at a lot of data from Pennsylvania. I have looked at the energy factor behind each candidate. I do not think that John Fetterman is a perfect nominee. He's kind of a far left guy. He supports the Green New Deal. He is very much in favor of abolishing the filibuster so the Democrats can do whatever they want in the Senate. He is pretty liberal on guns, but he nonetheless has some working class appeal because most of his messaging is not about Trump bad and racism, stuff like that. His messaging is about giving people jobs, giving people health care, and that resonates. He has a Democratic base behind him. Dr. Oz does not. And I don't think Dr. Oz is a bad candidate. I think he's a really good candidate. And I think that him running for office is going to be probably, he was the best pick for the Republicans. Now, he first needs to really ramp up his campaign, attack Fetterman with a few ads, and then I think he'll have pretty good chances at winning that seat. I do still think he has a very good chance, but he probably will be running behind Doug Mastriano, who has the Republican base fired up and who has more of an appeal than Josh Shapiro. However, in the end, I do think there will be some ticket splitting in Western Pennsylvania, where there are going to be a few Mastriano Fetterman voters. And even though Donald Trump has a personally close relationship with Dr. Oz, it doesn't translate to the Trump base automatically backing him as much as they're going to back Mastriano. And therefore, because I believe that Dr. Oz will have less energy behind himself in a Republican waiver, I actually still think that as right now, Fetterman is slightly favored, which can easily change. Pennsylvania is going to be a super close state. It will be decided by probably less than a percentage point. But I do currently see Fetterman favored simply because he has the energy factor behind him. Dr. Oz does not. He needs to find a way to link his board to the red wave. Now, then there's the state of Connecticut. I think in a red wave year like this, it's probably going to be a likely state. Polling also from that state has been a little closer than it usually is. So I would say it's probably going to be likely. But for the state of New Hampshire, I actually believe it's going to be a tilt Republican state, irregardless of who ends up pulling off the nomination. For two factors. Number one, Maggie Hassan is by far not as popular as Jeanne Shaheen. And when we take a look at Joe Biden's approval rating, one state where he's doing really, really bad in is New Hampshire. He's underwater by almost 15%. New Hampshire has traditionally always went against the incumbent in most of its major elections, including midterm elections. And I do think it will be a pretty heavy blow. There will be a pretty hefty blow against Joe Biden from the people of New Hampshire. I've been to New Hampshire a lot while I lived in Vermont, and they have always been very upset with how Joe Biden ran with things there. New Hampshire has traditionally always had a pretty big despise for incumbents, and these midterm elections are by any means going to be a referendum on Joe Biden's performance as president. So therefore, I'd like to say I do think it's going to be won by the Republicans, and the final Senate makeup is going to be 52-48. Now, Republicans could do even better. They could easily run Pennsylvania, run away with it, could take Arizona, run away with that as well. maybe even Colorado, but they simply didn't find the best formidable candidates. Like in Arizona, it's a crowded mess, and probably somebody will emerge as the primary victory with not the entirety of the base behind him. Exactly what we saw in Pennsylvania, we had a field of three major candidates. One of them emerged victorious, and he's now struggling to rally the base behind him. That is really hurting. You need to have the full energy factor behind yourself if you want to win. There's some Republicans like Doug Mastriano, who's running for governor, and Adam Laxalt, who were able to do that, to emerge as early frontrunners, but that did not happen a whole lot. It did happen in Georgia, but it should have happened more often, and then Republicans would be in a much better position right now than they happen to be at. Alright guys, this was a long video. I hope you liked it. If you did not, please feel free to trash me in the comment section down below. And yeah, have a nice day, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Max out. Goodbye.